This is the third and final section of the YouTube presentation of the June 11th lecture for GEO503 for summer 2014. We'll pick up where we left off at the end of section 2, where we're continuing to talk about the ArcGIS REST API, representational state transfer. We had talked about how responses vary widely depending on what is desired. We talked about how REST responses are made at the end of the next section. We'll talk for half of the remaining slides regarding results of REST response, or hence the REST response. This is what is returned once you make a REST request. Notice here once again a review of an example of a REST request in a URL, and we now know that this would be a GET. As we talked about last time, a POST does not include a URL. There's an F parameter in that request that specifies what type of output is desired. Without being specified, the default is HTML, but there's a couple other options that we'll look at now. Pictured as HTML, we have done an export map and got a result here. The result appears in this HTML page, and we can view the map that we requested. So to review that quickly, I can go to, for example, the National Geographic base map, export map. We'll just put the bounding box request in for now. Image format default is HTML, and the result is a HTML page with the map returned here in this box, and you can see the GET request in the URL still. So as I had mentioned last time, you could bookmark this if this particular request is something that you would wish to make regularly. Go back to the slideshow now. Another type of REST response that frankly would be used quite often, perhaps most often, is the JSON output. JSON, if you recall, stands for JavaScript Object Notation. We talked about that a couple of lectures ago. So here, pictured is a query, and the result that came in, we queried for a particular state. The result comes back in JSON, which we learned can be parsed into an actual JavaScript object. We saw an example of that a couple classes ago. If I go to my National Geographic example and pick a format of JSON, you'll see a much different result. We get a JavaScript object, which in this case represents the image. And if I highlight this, you'll see href attribute returns a URL. And if I copy, open up a new tab, and paste that, notice that this is the actual image that's been produced and is being stored on the ESRI server for a temporary basis. I don't recall how long. Obviously, with so many people using ArcGIS Online, this would be cleaned up. I believe it's an hour or so, after which this URL would no longer be available and you'd have to reissue the request. So again, notice that came in JSON, the format that we learned earlier in the class. That's a response type that you'll use regularly. So let's use the export operation on the National Geographic Map Server, sort of already doing that. We already clicked on that a few moments ago. And this also kind of highlights what we've done already in the past few moments. In this case, now this is an export map operation. These text boxes would vary based on the operation. We have a bounding box, spatial reference. I'll do an example of that in a second. And then the output format. In fact, I'll do that right now. So here, I put in 102717, and now these coordinates are on Western New York State Plain. Go back to the slide. The WKID, you'll see this come up. I may have touched on it briefly, and we will in other examples as well, is an ID number that represents every possible known map projection. WKID stands for Well-Known ID. If you don't know them, there's a website referenced here, spatialreference.org, in which you can search to get the WKID value for your particular projection that you're interested in. So here, now I'm entering a bounding box, but I'm indicating that I want the spatial reference of the map returned to be in Western New York State Plain. And if I do that in HTML, I get the map thusly. I could do the same, of course, with JSON. Or I could just get an image in plain format. Or I can actually create a KMZ file. And sometimes this doesn't work. Let's see what it does. The KMZ file of the export map can then be opened in a program such as Google Earth. So there's the National Geographic map in Google Earth. Just one other example, I'm going through a lot of the slides in a demo instead. One other format that I've certainly used before is the image format of PDF. When I click on that, oops, and I'll change it to HTML, I get download image here, and it actually creates the map in a PDF format. So I wanted to be sure to show that option as well. Now the slides, some of the remaining slides on this topic review just what we've just talked about. Here's the slide showing switching to PDF and clicking to get the actual PDF file with the image in it. I have a slide showing an example of returning the value in the response in JSON, or just an image. We looked at that a moment ago. So some examples of what we can do with REST responses. Switching gears to conclude the lecture, we will give a demo of publishing services to ArcGIS Online. Let me just add some layers in here. So say I have shapefile here, and obviously you'll recognize this program as ArcMap. At version 10.2, the source of map services we've been looking at are an MXD and ArcMap, which is very convenient for those of us that have this program. And the same goes whether I'm publishing ArcGIS Online, which I'm about to show, or whether I'm publishing to our own ArcGIS server. There's really not much different. ArcGIS Online basically is Esri's ArcGIS server. The first thing we need to do is to sign in using ArcGIS Desktop, and I'll show that now. We'll go through the slides and then I'll complete the demo to complete the lecture. The screenshot shows I prepared the screenshot in ArcGIS Desktop 10.2, but note the 10.1 is very similar in how this process is carried out. So once you sign in, File, Sign In with your ArcGIS Online account, go to File, Share As, and a Service. We're going to publish a map service. There's a screenshot here. and we choose a connection. You'll likely have just one connection available, your ArcGIS Online account. If you're like me and you have both ArcGIS Online accounts and ArcGIS server sites locally, double check to make sure you're publishing to where you really want to. We then need to pick the service name that this map will be published as. Up comes the service editor that lets us define a lot of the parameters about this service, and in many cases the default is perfectly acceptable. One thing, if you look at capabilities, there's two possibilities: tiled mapping and featured access. We looked at both a little bit previously. Tiled mapping is where the map is actually split into tiles and cached, where we're just returning blocks at different scales of images. Google Maps is tiled, that's how it can respond so quickly. Feature access, on the other hand, actually provides access to the actual features within the shapefiles that are copied, and often is preferable if you want to do a lot of query and development. So in this slide, I've unchecked tiled mapping and selected feature access. Once you click on feature access, you'll see there are 5 different capabilities. This was 4 capabilities until very recently. You can prevent users from editing, creating new features, or deleting features using this, or you allow it, as I've done here. The simplest setting here would be just query, to be able to ask permission or to view only. And now at 10.2, a new option, sync, has been designed for tablets and mobile devices with mobile software to allow you to check this data out onto a tablet and look at it without a connection back to ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Server. So that's a very important thing to activate if you're interested in doing that. Finally, for item description, even if you're not planning on sharing this with the world, ESRI requires a summary and tags. And then finally, under sharing, we choose who to share with. I've chosen not to share this with the world or the public. I've chosen just to share with this particular group that I set up for our class. So if I go to the map, let me sign in. Now I can say File, Share As, Service. I'm going to publish a service. And here's where you make sure you have the right connection. I have multiple connections, you may not. But I'm going to make sure University at Buffalo is the connection. That's where we're publishing this map. And I give it, a service name. And continue. So parameters I'm going to leave as default. Doesn't look like I have a choice anyway. For capability, just to show you, under tiled mapping, it would just create specific tiles. This might be useful for very large areas and very detailed maps, but for just 50 states, certainly feature access is more desirable. And notice here's where I can allow people through the internet to create a new state, remove one, query the most default, update change attributes, or sync. Then I need to enter a summary. Obviously you see this is where you can enter a description, access use constraints, and so on. And I'm going to share this service with only this class group. One other thing you can do before we're ready is click the Analyze button. The Analyze button makes sure there aren't any errors that would prevent publishing. Sometimes there are warnings, but these errors are what are most important. I don't have any, so I'm going to click Publish. So ArcGIS is creating what's called a service definition. This is in preparation for creating a service and shipping this data onto ArcGIS Online. Now the files are being transferred to the internet. And it continues to publish service definition. Maybe worth fast forwarding through this. And the service has been published successfully. So if I were to go to ArcGIS.com, sign in, oops, you'll see here's the service definition and the features for June 11th lecture, what we just published. And notice if I click here, I can see the REST endpoint for our service that we just created, symbology, fields, and so on, just like the REST endpoints that we saw earlier in the lecture for our ESRI generated services. And I can click it open, add to new map, and we can see our data that originated in the MXD in an ArcGIS Online environment. Sometimes this can be very slow.